Well, hello and welcome. As Bill gave me that gracious introduction, my name's Mark Hacker. I am a New York native. I hope you don't hold that against me. Mom's from Brooklyn, dad's from the Bronx, but I have no charming accent to give you today. But I do have a lot of information to share on performance management. And as Bill said, it's an evolving subject. It's a complex subject. Yet for me is why I have notes to go off to. But I'm telling you that this space is so important right now. I think Bill said it really well. It's evolving. And that's at a critical juncture in evolution, okay? So my topic today is increasing agility in responding to the new normal of work. So we'll work on some things today, but I basically have 3 goals for you in this session. First is to focus your energy. So there's a lot of energy out there around performance management, yet it's somewhat dissipated. There's conflicting views. We don't know what different practitioners, which advice is valid, which is not. So I'd like you to be able over the next 2 days to take your energy and kind of focus it like a laser a little more as to what you're gonna do when you get back. The second goal is to try to separate some of the signal from the noise. So those of you that grew up with the transistor radios and trying to dial in, there was always a lot of noise. But once you got the signal, you got the game, you got the music, what you were going for. So separate some of the signal from the noise. And then also to introduce you to the HCI Agile Performance Management model. So there's all my bio stuff. I would encourage you, follow me on LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter. I'm always tweeting good stuff. Do it on Facebook if you like dogs and Colorado sunsets and baseball games and that kind of stuff. But I did grow up back here, yet I've been in Colorado for 35 years. And during my corporate days, I was an HR business partner, I think before we called it that, but had a territory from about Kansas City to Hawaii, fast-growing company. Got to do a lot of different projects there. And one was performance management. So I've seen how it was done. I've seen how it's being done now, but I've also seen the future of how it can be done, and that's exciting. I think John Kennedy said it real well, President Kennedy, when he said, we choose to do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. And performance management is hard. It's hard work. We're not gonna stand up here and kid you that it's not hard work, okay? But we believe the response to that hard work is agility because traditional approaches aren't effective any longer. Now, one of the things that our colleagues at HCI do is we say, don't read the slides, people know how to read. So if you want me to read the slides, I will. Other than that, I'm assuming that you all know how to read and you don't want me to say the performance review was conceived in the lesson. So as you look at the slide, think about traditional approaches and how they're no longer effective. Think of external factors and how those demand a new paradigm, a new approach. And we believe that agility can not only be a way to better manage performance, it can also mitigate risk. It can also be a business continuity issue, but that most importantly, it can be a competitive advantage, okay? So there's some compelling reasons for you to think about being more agile. Number one is the more agile that you are, the more you're able to customize for your unique culture. Now, you can't just go buy a performance management system off the rack and plug and play. You've got to expect a level of customization. And one thing that the agile process allows you to do is adapt to your unique culture, okay? You've got to have senior leadership support. You've got to link to business objectives, but you've got to be culturally accurate first. So our first suggestion is start building on what you do well. A lot of the literature out there says, throw away the performance appraisal. There's even books, get rid of the performance appraisal. I don't believe that that's the effective response. I believe paring it down, but building on a strength and building what your culture is about and what your organization does well can make it go from a liability to being an advantage, but it will be hard work. So here's one company's rationale for change. You know, a lot of companies making changes. You see them, you read about them, you may be part of it, small, medium, large. they're changing their approach, okay? Accenture found managers and employees were spending an inordinate amount of time on the performance appraisal process, and they said we're gonna make significant changes. Many other organizations have too. Microsoft has, GE has, Deloitte, Nike, Adobe, we can go down the list. Some of you, again, may be making those changes, and that's our job now to help equip you to do that. In fact, I read last week about over 200 of the Fortune 1000 companies have made some changes or are in the process of making changes. So I don't see this as a fad, I see this as a trend. And we're in the nascent stages of that. It's evolving, and it presents a great opportunity for HR to step up and lead. So, you know, we're gonna look at our agenda for today. You know, we're gonna look at performance management from several different perspectives. We're gonna help you begin planning your journey and have you leave this session with an assessment of your organization's current state. So you'll have a good baseline when you leave today. Each of you has a book at your place, Agile Performance Management Individual Action Planner, or APM IAP, for those of you that like acronyms, and sometimes we say that's TMA, that's too many acronyms. But the idea is, you're probably thinking to yourself, hey, this agility sounds great, but my friends that work in software, people that work in Silicon Valley, that works for them. But I work for a traditional organization. I work for a bank. I work for an insurance company. I work for a hardlines retailer. How can I make those changes if my organization isn't agile? Well, even if the business is not agile, you can still make this process agile. So let's talk about your business and start you off with the idea of it can be done, okay? So for this next section, I want you to get the framework of it can be done. We may not be agile, but it can be done. So got a quote, Mitch, up here, and the quote says, the answer is not to abandon performance management, but rather to reinvent it. So I want you to kind of put on your agile hat, put on your Thomas Edison hat. As a New Jersey schoolboy, I understand Thomas Edison, but you're gonna have to tinker with things to make it right, okay? So, but build on what you do well, just don't throw the whole thing out. So, what is agile? Let's just give you a glimpse of an agile approach. It's a viable way to make changes, okay? First thing you're gonna do, you're gonna discover, you're gonna design, develop. So you've got your 3Ds, then you're gonna test, then you're gonna go back. Short cycle times, or sprints, they would be called in the agile world, okay? Business needs a new approach for this new normal, and essentially agile is the ability to move quickly and easily, okay? So you're gonna reduce development time through sprints, but it's an iterative, it's a flexible approach. And again, going back to that key word, Bill, of evolving, we need flexible approaches right now. You can't just go look up a recipe and plug and play this, okay? So you're gonna have to test, you're gonna have to design, develop, and tinker with things, okay? So the mindset needs to be, I've gotta be agile, I've gotta be more open to experimentation. If you have an opportunity to do a pilot, get a champion and do the pilot, okay? Find out what works in your organization, okay? And the only way you can do that is through experimentation, okay? What are you getting out of this? You're getting speed. You're getting speed to market. You're getting speed to change. You're getting speed to response to the external factors that are affecting business. So again, I'm telling you that agile, and I've heard it from people, the 4 times that I've taught this course, I've heard it from individuals is, yes, I tried part of it and it worked and I'm excited to do the next part of it, okay? So when I said before that even if you're not an agile company, that you can do an agile learning method, the idea is the same kind of sprint cycles that you'll see on the next slide. Agile learning method helps you move quickly and easily. So it's experience, reflect, try, and apply, okay? You experience something, you reflect on it, or sometimes people familiar with agile will call that retrospective or retro. So you experience, you retro, You try it, you apply it, and you keep making changes. But the idea is this model, I would recommend, if your business is more traditional, think of this as a learning driver and not a business driver, okay? You want to align and link to the business, yet this might be something that serves you well for development, serves you well for learning, but it really can work in any part of the business, okay? So, with that being said, I mentioned this phrase, new normal, okay? So what is the new normal, okay? It's complex, okay? We're gonna look at some of the realities that are out there in the world that we're faced with every day, yet the idea on this new normal is there is a way to counteract that, okay? Tried to put a quote in for each part here. Absolutely love this quote right here. I'll let you read it to yourselves. Now think about trying to conduct modern financial transactions with carrier pigeons. Isn't that what we're doing with performance management in most organizations? It really is time for a big change. So, little show of hands is, how many of you feel successful in navigating this new normal? Pretty good, a couple of hands. Are you doing performance management or are you managing performance, okay? Is it something that you're doing to people in your organization, or is it something you're providing tools for managers to have dialogue with, to have conversations, to have feedback with people, okay? And most importantly is, can you make an effective case for change and show the value add to your organization? That's the key for today, and that's what the workbook's about to get you started on that journey or continue it, is making the effective case for change to get that senior leadership support. We assume you know the culture as well as anybody. If you're working with performance management, you know the culture as well as anybody in your organization, okay? If you can get senior leadership support, and we're sure that you can, the hardest part, though, is that linking directly to business objectives, okay? And it gets more complicated every day because what's the world? It's VUCA, okay? VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, okay? So is that a fair descriptor of your world now? Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, okay? I think that's probably the nicest way in mixed company to describe the world you face every day, okay? So if you think of this new normal, it's a good level set for where we are right now. So think of this as a good description of the context of our world circa 2016. So again, show of hands, how many of you think the pace of change is fast today? Lots of hands up. How many of you think it's going to be faster in 2026? Okay? So this is good that you're here and we can prepare for that, because if it's intense now, it's going to be turbocharged in 2026. So let's talk about some of these realities that are out there, okay? Here are some of the realities we see that are affecting organizations, okay? Now, as little as 10 years ago, we mentioned 2026. Think way back in the time machine, do that Scooby-Doo thing, and go back to 2006, okay? It was a gentler time. It was a more peaceful time, right? What we really mean by that is that people had more defined roles. People worked on more defined teams. The tasks were more predictable. If you look at the FTE or the job enlargement that's happening now, somebody who was doing maybe a job and a half in 2006 is probably doing 2.5 or 3 jobs right now. Okay, so the idea is there's been a lot of job enlargement out there, but there's also a lot of changes. So looking down this list, what do you see that resonates with you on that list? Just call out. What? Millennial workers, you love them, don't you? But they only stay for 4 years, right? So you've heard the one with the CFO that says, hey, they're only going to stay 4 years. Why should we invest in them? And you've heard the smart CEO that says, well, what if we don't invest in them and they stay? Okay, so it's a dilemma. Okay, what else do you see besides the millennials? 24/7, always on, that connectivity. You got the iPhone under the pillow type thing. Okay, what else? One more. Contingent workforce, thank you, because this is the one that shocks us the most, okay? What the research shows is 34% of the workforce is now contingent. There's some kind of 1099, consultant, independent contractor, have multiple jobs. So think about it. You're gonna walk out of here tonight, and every 3.4 out of 10 people you walk by is gonna be a contingent worker. I don't know what that 0.4 looks like, but the point is, it's an amazing number. And if you think that number is only gonna get higher, one of the estimates back on the millennials is by 2020, they will be over 50% of the workforce. That's a huge change. They're here to stay. Couple of other ones that I see, social media, Glassdoor, democratization of information. You kind of saw it last week in the House of Representatives. They turn off the camera and they're using Snapchat and they're using, Periscope to go ahead and live broadcast. I think online shopping. I'm a guy that worked for a retailer for many, many years. Last Christmas, I did not go in one retail store to do my Christmas shopping. It was all done online. And the last one that I would point out, because it's really noticeable here, is Uber, okay? If you stand before you go and look at those 3.4 people tonight, stand outside the front door of the hotel and just do a quick survey. What's the ratio of cabs to black SUVs, okay? My unscientific research says it's about 50-50, okay? So if you look at that, that's a huge change, and you hear people, we want to be the Uber of X, okay? So a lot of changes, and it's worth spending some time thinking about that, because how do you respond to that, okay? How do you deal with those shifting sands? In some places, it's quicksand, actually. So how do you make your organization more agile, or your part of the organization more agile? You adapt, you innovate. You embrace speed, you experiment, you learn from that environment, okay? You can't just be doing the four-wall thinking. You've got to learn from the environment. So real-time data can be a huge advantage to you if you're flexible enough to respond to changes internally to keep up at least with the external rate of change, okay? So a good question to take back, I don't know how you phrase this to your senior leadership team, or if you are senior leadership, this should be keeping you up at night, is our internal rate of change equal to or greater than the external rate of change? Because if it's not, you're gonna have to rethink the way you do things, and Agile is a great way to do that, okay? So, countermeasures, great. You've described VUCA. You've scared me with all these changing things that are out there. What am I supposed to do about it? Well, you know a lot of what to do already, yet I would tell you with VUCA, there are countermeasures, okay? So to stick with our military concept, because VUCA was born out of Cold War military strategic planning, there are countermeasures to VUCA, and they all line up, so they're easy for people like me to remember. So volatile, the response is vision, okay? Vision becomes that much more important. Not just words in the wall, not just words that are put up on the wall, but actual behavior in the hall, okay? So we're looking for actual change. We're looking for behavior in the hall, not just words on the wall. Uncertainty can be countermeasured with understanding. Understanding can be driven by collaboration, crowdsourcing, survey, polling. What are you doing with the engagement information you get every year? Are you just sending that engagement results back out? Yeah, we were 43 this year. Our goal is to be 47.3 next year, so we just added 10% to it. That's not good, okay? You've got to find a way to translate that into dollars and cents, okay? How do you break that down so people understand how much disengagement is costing us? How do you take a concept like turnover and quantify that and increase understanding of that? Complexity can be countered with clarity, okay? Leaders need to stop and look and listen. And that's a challenge when we're 24/7, 365, okay? So just when, if you were taught like me, it was stop, look, and listen, okay? Look both ways, okay? Pick your head up from the phone and look both ways, okay? So there's things that are going on out there that leaders need to be more in tune with. They need to try to make sense of the chaos for their people. And the last is ambiguity, and the response to ambiguity is agility, moving quickly, applying solutions, and I would submit is possibly the best way to respond to this new normal is to be more agile in our thinking, to try new things and experiment. And you're gonna see a lot of good information the next couple of days to help you do that, okay? So before we get into talking more about the business case and get into using the planner, you know, just to kind of talk about 5 macro trends that we see that are emerging as part of that landscape. Okay, business, it's much more dynamic, and therefore we've got to be much more dynamic. The first one is always shocking to me. As a guy who ran L&D departments and looking at what was going on, to know that my internal customer is not having to go to my Monopoly shop would be a bit disconcerting to me. You know, that they would be out there, you know, here's our performance man. Well, I Googled it, and this is the first thing that came up, so this is what we should do, okay? So the idea is they have lots of sources for information. Look at past hiring trends. Those may not be the most accurate predictor of future success. You might not want long-term employee retention. You might want that. But if we look at a lot of companies that do a good job on headcount and short-term planning and annual cycles, they have the capacity to do well in longer-term planning. I'm more strategic, more 3 to 5 year planning. And cultural fit and adaptability also becomes so important. So, you know, again, what worked in the past might not work in the future. We need a new response, okay? So in summary for that part is, you know, 2026 is around the corner, but agility is not just the ability to change, okay? It's a cultivated capability. It senses opportunities and threats. It looks outside. It solves problems. It adapts. It builds on the fact that we're good at knowing inside the organization what's going on. We can take that skill and we can apply that outside the organization and make it a strategic competitive advantage in the marketplace, okay? If you check your mindset on performance management. So let's talk about implementation and making the business case for change. But again, I've built a quote in here, Mitch, because I like the quote, so I'll let you read that. One of my favorite performance management quotes of all time, and if you haven't read Lawler, I would highly, highly recommend it. He's been doing this for about 40 years, has some really good stuff out there, but that is a sad but true reality in a lot of the organizations. So let's get back on the positive side of the street and talk about what we can do, okay? We've discussed several factors that are the driving forces and that are external. We've talked a little bit about the internal, but rethinking your approach, the idea is that shift happens, okay? That's where I'm thankful I don't have the accent, okay? So that's a careful pronunciation. Shift happens, okay, in response to the new normal. So let's start with a baseline definition. Here's the HCI definition. And you can see on the next slide, Mitch, you can see that performance management is a continuous system. And you can see the words highlighted alignment is important, and alignment has always been important. Yet I would submit agility is a mindset that makes alignment possible. So let's talk about mindset for just a second, okay? So if your mindset drives your behavior and your behavior drives your results, if your mindset is, I've got to get rid of performance management, your behavior is going to be something like, let's make that form easier. Let's automate it. Let's make it less painful. Instead of having to draw blood out of a vein, we can prick a finger, okay? Now that's going to just give you the same results. You're still taking blood out of something. You're still doing performance appraisals. You've just made them less painful. So the idea is through that series of sprints, through collaboration, through finding out from folks what they want, you can actually totally reinvent it. And we've seen companies that have. Now, part of it is we bring some baggage. So let's talk about our baggage a little bit, okay? So here is the traditional performance management model, okay? So if you look at the software development model, the waterfall method, what you'll see is they're both linear and sequential. Now, again, remember 2006, think way, way back in the 80s and 90s, this may have worked back then. That neither of those is a good response. Just as on the left side, that's not the way you develop software right now, we would submit that that's not the way you effectively manage performance or have a performance management process, okay? It just doesn't work. In fact, a lot of times, the evaluation's outdated by the time you give it, okay? So, where did this system that over 50% of organizations say is ineffective come from? So let's just do our one slide and talk about the history and mention Industrial Revolution, Hawthorne experiments, Frederick Winslow Taylor. Let's mention those names that are out there. But the idea was when we did manufacturing work, when we did piece work, when we did things that were production oriented, it may have worked, okay? In the 80s and 90s, things started changing with knowledge workers, okay? It's not adequate in today's world. It's too static, okay? Knowledge work is not defined as widgets, okay? Knowledge work is creating something. So who remembers re-engineering? And if that dates you, you don't have to raise your hand, because I remember doing re-engineering, okay? You know, and now it's called business process redesign, because sometimes in HR we take things and we rename them, okay? So it really is re-engineering, but what did we learn from re-engineering? What we learned is don't automate, obliterate, okay? What we saw in re-engineering was a lot of times we were fascinated with the cogs and the doodads and the gewgaws of technology that let's automate this. Let's make this so it's automatic. Let's have it so it auto-populates fields. And I'm sure I'd love to hear some of your performance evaluation horror stories. I have mine, I'm just not sharing them on the stage. But I will tell you that a lot of times this has become so mechanistic, it's not effective. So, you know, think back to Office Space and the two Bobs, okay? That's how your workforce sees the performance appraisal. If they think about it at all. It's not like a dentist appointment. They're thinking it's the two Bobs from Office Space, okay? So think about obliterating and not just automating things, okay? Start with strategy and reinvent performance management, okay? Make it a centerpiece of engagement, retention, collaboration. Don't make it this dreaded ritual, okay? So the idea is the once-a-year meeting's not enough. I think we can all agree that the once-a-year meeting's not enough. I love what Ken Blanchard says is, don't save feedback up for a holiday. Give gifts throughout the year, okay? I love that. It's like, why do we save it and then just dump it on the table during a holiday, okay? Now, if you look at the numbers on the next slide, it says 8, 10, and 58, okay? The 8 and the 10 are from the Deloitte Global Human Capital Trends Report, 2015 version. The 2016 version that came out about 2 months ago real good reading. I love this stuff. So as I was reading that, there's some really good information on career management in there. But these numbers, these 8 and 10, 8% believe that traditional performance management drives business value. That's lower than Congress's rating. That's bad. 10% believe performance management is a good use of time. So let me see. Everybody, get up on stage, and 9 people are standing over there saying there's better ways to use my time, and one's standing over here, and we say, we'll go with the one guy over here, okay? That doesn't make any sense, okay? So the 8 and the 10, the 58 is from another report that I like, that's the HCI Talent Pulse survey, done several times a year. This was one in 2014, and it said 58% disliked their organization's review system. If I was running a company and I got a 58% number that said people disliked it, my first question is gonna be, can I come up with something different? Okay, so that's kind of the call for change. We're gonna talk more about making that case for it, but if it's so important, why are the numbers so low in delivering results? Well, this slide I'm not gonna read to you, it's a little dense, but it's a good takeaway is there's 8 concerns with traditional performance management. I'm sure you could add to the list there, or you could pick the one that you identify with. But ultimately, the problem is performance appraisals, they don't accurately assess performance. So why do we do this ritualistic kabuki theater every year? People don't like it, organizations say it doesn't work, and progressive organizations are reinventing the way they do it. So to put it another way is, what's the business case for not changing? I can't come up with one. I've racked my brain to come up with a business case for not changing, and I haven't come up with it yet, okay? So here's a scary thought to me as a larger guy, but when somebody says get on the scale, I go, really? You want me to get on the scale? Can I just tell you what I weigh? No, we're gonna have you get on the scale, okay? So you're gonna get on the scale to evaluate your organization, okay? So one more quote and 2 more slides, and then we'll get into it. 63% of respondents stated their review was not a true indicator of their performance, okay? You got 58, you got 63. I'm giving you some ammo to take back to make your business case for change. I'm gonna give you another one on this next slide. Fascinating stuff is, we talk about mindset driving behavior, driving results. Great resource is Carol Dweck from Stanford, DWECK. Carol Dweck has worked for about 40 years on motivation, self-determination, and she actually wrote a book called Mindset, so it's an easy one to remember. But she talks about fixed versus growth, and we've seen this in science. We've seen this where it used to be thought that you were fully developed coming out of adolescence, and now we've seen people developing new neural pathways, new neurons firing, new synapses, new connections on the neuroscience side of things. But on the behavioral side of things, we see a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, and you know exactly what that looks like in your organization, okay? It might be, this is how we've done it around here, we don't need to change, or let's try something different, okay? So growth, creativity, innovation, and solving problems is what we see growth helping with, okay? So if you want something that's more creative, more innovative, helps you solve a problem, you gotta get to a growth mindset, okay? So growth and agility go hand in hand. So if you think it's a leap to get to agile, it's not, but you gotta start with this growth mindset. And I put in some words under agility to describe those, okay? Intelligence, fluidity, okay? Intelligence can change. I can tell you I've seen it change in corporate learners, I've seen it change in graduate students, I've seen it change in public seminar participants, okay? So fluidity. Success is nothing, all or nothing, based on a single outcome, okay? That epic achievement, okay? Well, what about mile markers, okay? 2 weeks, my wife's family's from Iowa, so we, opposites attract. She's from Iowa, I'm from New York. But once in a while, we have to go back and see the people in Iowa, so we're gonna make that drive from Denver, okay? It is 652 miles, not 653, but 652. Why do I know that? Because one trip I sat there and counted every one of them, and I kind of muttered and mumbled, 600. So now I know mile markers, okay? Now I can look and I can say 65.2 miles, we're 10% of the way there, okay? Or I know at 320 some odd that we're halfway there, time for lunch, okay? So the idea is mile markers. Also, what we see in a fixed mindset is if an obstacle or a block comes in place, we're taught to go around that to get to our goal, okay? Now, the idea is failure is not a reflection of ability, but a starting point of reflection, and that's the concept of fail forward. Or as my former bosses used to say, you can fail forward once, just don't make it a habit, okay? So avoiding challenges versus embracing challenges, a lot of that is self-direction. Feeds right in with the millennials and what they're asking for, the Gen Z folks. And that feedback is threatening. I would submit this is the biggest change we're seeing in the millennials and Generation Z people is they want feedback. They want to know where they stand in real time. Please just tell me, okay? If you think yearly is not enough, what I've heard is quarterly is not enough. They want almost constant updates, okay? So what's keeping you from giving that, okay? Isn't your job to manage performance and to give feedback, okay? So developing that agile mindset, let's talk about the case for change, which will lead us into the individual action planners, okay? The business need for change is agility is a business issue. It is an engagement issue, and it is a performance imperative, okay? That 2004 Talent Pulse that I mentioned, it shows that traditional performance management has only one function, and that is to provide documentation. So if your fixed go-to is, I need documentation for performance, find a way to leverage technology, find a way to leverage feedback, find a way to do something to get that documentation that you need, because you're spending a lot of time and money to get documentation if that's the only thing that you're getting out of it. So let's talk about how we're gonna shift, okay? So you've got the individual action planners. First thing I want you to do is write your name on the front. So you don't leave it on a table. Somebody says, what is this? You know, now you got your name on the front so somebody can embarrass you and say, Joe, you left your planner here, okay? So this planner, once you locate it, the first 4 pages have a scale on there. What I'm gonna ask you to start on is working on those 24 questions in there. And you don't need to do all right exactly at this minute, but I'd like you to start, and over the course of our session, work on those. So you'll see there's question 1 through 4, flip the page, flip the page. Once you get to page 4, you total them all up, you take your total score, you divide by 6, and what it's gonna do is give you a total for each of the 6 areas. And we're gonna come back to that at the end. But let's do a little guessing game first, okay? Of those 6 areas that you see on page 4, okay, at the bottom of page 4, which do you think you're gonna score lowest on? What do you think would be your lowest score? Okay, so the goal setting. Anybody different? Feedback, okay. Maybe it's the frequency of the feedback, maybe it's the quality of it. Coaching, okay, again, maybe it's not enough, maybe it's not done right, okay? So if you think that's what you might score lowest on, what do you think you're gonna score highest on? Social, okay, excellent. That's great. So social recognition. On comp, okay? So maybe the comp and rewards piece, okay? And some will say strengths, we hear that a lot, okay? But that sometimes we've got to think about that. So as you work on that throughout the session, I want you to think about where you think you score highest and lowest, and we'll come back and ask you if you're more traditional or transitional or agile, okay? So what you're gonna see is really 3 takeaways from here. Number 1, you're not gonna be 100% agile, and you're not gonna be 100% traditional. Most organizations are somewhere on that continuum from 1 to 100, okay? It's knowing where you are. There's no perfect score. There's no ideal score. It doesn't say, hey, if you scored here, go stand on that side of the room, okay? The first step in knowing where you want to go is to know where you are today. So what you're doing is you're establishing a baseline. You're establishing a baseline for the next 2 days, but a baseline to also take back. And then focusing on the different areas, or our 6 areas of performance management, will give you an idea of where you want to focus your efforts on when you get back. So the idea is we're going to have you work on an evolutionary process, and there will be some changes, but you've really got to have a focus around that change, okay? So we believe our agile performance management model is a practical way to focus that change. So let's go ahead and look at that model. It's broken into 6 different pieces, okay? We're gonna look at each of the 6 components in detail, and some of you may have already seen that scale tracks them in order, so I'll talk through those in order. So, Mitch, if you can put the model up there. It's one of my favorite models because it's a circular one, okay? Yeah. So as you look at the model right here, it doesn't work inside out or outside in, but they all work together. What I usually do with this one myself is, and I didn't do it today, but I ask people, if you have a highlighter, fill that in. Again, I might be dating myself, but some of you may remember when you went to the fair or down the shore, you may remember that hammer that you hit and it went up and rang the bell. Or the United Way thermometer, those of you that have had the pleasure of doing that in your HR department. I have people take the highlighter and fill in how much of that circle they feel is the strength. So like on recognition, they might say, we're good at recognition, and that's almost full. But then they say on feedback, not so much, maybe I only get up to effective. On agile goal setting, they'll say, maybe I'm lower, I don't even touch the words. But on coaching, we do a good job on that. Maybe I've filled that out all the way through performance, okay? So let's talk about each one of these areas a little bit. And the way I'm gonna do it is to give you the picture of it and the first component, then just conventional wisdom and strengths, okay? So the first one is strengths-based development, okay? So as we look at the first component, we're going to look at first at the conventional wisdom, then at our point of view. So the conventional wisdom around strengths says that IDPs will help me with areas of opportunity, okay? And if I get this eval done, I can get back to work, okay? Well, maybe the eval is your work, okay? So my question is if you're just your conventional wisdom, is it something like a blood test or going to the dentist that I have to suffer through? How do the people that you're doing that to feel? It goes back to that Lawler quote. Sometimes it's something the top tells the middle to do to the bottom, okay? So Mitch, if we can go forward a couple past conventional wisdom. So we look at the conventional wisdom around, again, the IDPs is that they're gonna help people improve. I skipped right over that quote, so I'll give you a second to read that. Yeah, so the conventional wisdom says, my job is to sort of tell you that I have this, as your boss, I've got this all-seeing, all-knowing disease, okay? And how I like to do that is I like to play junior psychologist. And I like to use the word but a lot, okay? You did a really good job on this, but remember that time back in June when the wheels kind of came? Yeah, okay. So again, that but is kind of a verbal eraser, right? That person didn't hear any of that stuff before. Hey, you did a good job. What they heard was back in June, okay? So the idea is I'm gonna play junior psychologist, And I'm going to tell you what I think is going on inside your head. And then I'm going to create a development plan to address those needs. Now, when I did development plans for the big company, they would come back, every year they would come back, and a bunch of people would say, what are your top 3 development areas of opportunity for the year? And they'd say, improve sales, improve profit, and improve margin. And I'd say, well, those really aren't development opportunities. Those are business opportunities. We're talking about things like leadership, coaching, feedback, delegation. But if you think of this, why do we have this conversation if people dread it and your employees might only hear yada, 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 and they're thinking, boy, if I just keep my mouth shut and I don't say anything stupid for the next hour, they're going to give me some money at the end of it. So I'm going to sit here. Is there anything else you want to talk about? No. And you're thinking, just show me the money. Just show me the money. And I hope it keeps track with inflation, okay? So the next one, our point of view, the HCI point of view on strengths is that a different approach is needed in the response to the new world of work, okay? We believe a strengths-based approach can have a greater impact on engagement and retention and performance than just a scattershot approach or a traditional approach, okay? Today's effective leaders have to be, and I've heard this phrase, I don't know who said it, but I really like it, they have to be portfolio advisors, okay? So those of you in the financial services know what that means, okay? You need to be a portfolio advisor for your people and their careers. So help them grow. We see career management topping a lot of the surveys of what people want from their organizations right now. They want their bosses to be, even bosses I shouldn't say, they want their leaders to be more of a coach. They want their leaders to be a multiplier of talent, okay? I think back to when we did talent reviews and we did succession planning. One time I was running the talent review and it came down to 2 people, okay? They were both equal and we went back and forth and back and forth. And the VP said, let's take a break. So we took a break and I talked to him in the hallway and he said, is there a tiebreaker out there? And I said, let me offer up the tiebreaker I think would be, ask them, candidate A and candidate B, how many people did each of them promote last year? Candidate A promoted 12 people. Candidate B promoted 1. Who do you think got the job? Who do you think got the promotion? It was the guy that promoted people, okay? So again, he was a multiplier of talent, okay? So again, it doesn't mean avoid weakness. It means focus more on leveraging strengths. Treat me as an individual. Let me know where I stand. Build on my skills and my talents, okay? What is the value proposition for me working here? It's a different social compact now, okay? I didn't say contract. I said compact right now. It's changed, okay? Sometimes you're gonna have to give people reasons for staying, okay? And one of them is we will help you get skills. We will help you grow your career. We will help you grow as an individual. Okay, so that's strengths, conventional wisdom, points of view. Next is agile goal setting, okay? And I heard from some that this is tough, okay? We're gonna talk tomorrow in our panel discussion about some responses to that, some things that have worked. You know, you can look at Google and their use of OKRs that is out there, so another acronym out there, operational key results. But Google has a fairly substantive way of doing goals through OKRs that's very interesting. But conventional wisdom says the manager and employees sit down once a year and they set goals, and then they have a powwow, they have a meeting at the end of the year and they evaluate that. Yet in article after article, we read about how this is an outdated approach, okay? So if you think of some more bits of conventional wisdom, there may be a more frequent, there may be a mid-year evaluation, or there may be that self-evaluation, okay? So if we don't think that evaluations accurately assess performance, let me tell you, based on my experience, self-evaluations don't, but not for the reason that you're thinking. So years and years ago, before I had all this earned gray hair and I was younger and thinner, my boss said, I'd like you to write your self-evaluation. So I wrote the self-evaluation. He took that, he retyped it into a Word document and handed it to my boss in the meeting in a room with the three of us and said, Mark, let me tell you about your evaluation for the year. So what did I learn besides he was a snake? What did I learn? I learned that if I'm going to write my own self-evaluation, I better make it a darn good one, right? So again, that has no predictive efficacy at all. So conventional wisdom is very different from our point of view. Our point of view is that old school annual goals aren't flexible enough to be relevant. They get stale real fast. The shelf life has compressed due to connectivity. Agile approaches, though, are valid responses that can be adapted to work in your organization. More frequent evaluations, at a minimum, frequency becomes huge, okay? Updating priorities. Updating priorities is not just about managing performance, it's helping people stay focused on what matters to the business, okay? So if the rate of change is affecting the business, don't you want people to be focused on what's affecting the business, okay? So you see mention of Scrum and OKRs, but I would tell you frequency is a piece of low-hanging fruit out there for you. Experiment, find out what works in your culture, but retrospective, some kind of agile response, okay? So as you keep working through this, you're probably getting an idea of where are we falling on that? Are we traditional? Are we transitional? Are we more agile? But let's continue our tour of the model. And area 3 is feedback, the third component. And now conventional wisdom. Managers collect data. Managers sit down once a year to do the eval. And as a good HR business partner, I would stand up and I would say, it's part of a process, it's not an event. Now, think about it, and I've got a little hindsight now, and I can look in the rearview mirror and say, Mark, it really was an event. It was an event that people wanted to get over with, you know. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm really looking forward to going to the dentist. Nobody wakes up in the morning and say, I'm really looking forward to getting my evaluation. They may say, I'm looking forward to getting the reward of that, or I'm looking forward to getting it done. But nobody is looking forward to the event that is the evaluation, okay? So I collect this data, we sit down, and based on what I tell you and you nod your head to, you're gonna change over the next year, is that right? Yeah, I can't hear you, is that right? Yeah, of course you're gonna change over the next year. And maybe we'll throw in this individual development plan just for a little added accountability. So we can come back and say, you did a really good job on your goals last year, but you didn't do anything about your individual development stuff, okay? Now, there's gotta be a better response to that, okay? So if you think of the conventional wisdom, it's not effective anymore. Our point of view is feedback should be more frequent and hopefully continuous. If you can find a way to make feedback continuous throughout the year, think of how performance could improve. Think of using the dashboard, using the data, sharing the information, peer-to-peer recognition, peer-to-peer evaluations, all kinds of things. Feedback that's just in time is more relevant and actionable. We know that, okay? So why would you wait to do it once a year? Organizations should provide systems that drive managers' behavior, okay? So check-ins, apps, templates, whatever it is that works in your organization. I'm not saying you have to do check-in, although it could work. I'm not saying you need an app, although it could work. I'm not saying go use what this company's doing, but there's so much out there that you can learn for. It goes back to that vision as a countermeasure, okay? Volatile, evolving space requires vision. You all are the people that are gonna drive the vision around performance management in your organization. And we know from organizations we work with that the best do invest, okay? So, fourth area, coaching for performance. I heard some people say coaching for performance is an opportunity for us, and it is. Why is it? A lot of times there's an old school thinking about coaching and what it is and what it isn't. And doing some of that with individuals and teams and organizations in my private practice, I hesitate to say I am an executive coach. I'd like to say I coach executives. Now, it sounds like semantics, but when I say executive coach, you think of one kind of cat. When I say somebody that works with executives, you think of a different kind of person, okay? Now, what that also drives is this mindset of that coaching can only be done by certain people. See, our point of view is that coaching can be done by trained leaders in your organization, okay? Coaching is something that can be learned, okay? Traditional, conventional wisdom says it's an earned privilege. It's reserved for the chosen few, and it takes an external coach to deliver that feedback, because you know what? We're going to see Sarah responses. We're going to see shock, anger, resistance, acceptance. We're going to move through Kubler-Ross's change continuum. We're going to have to deal with the 8 vagrancies of this. The idea is your managers can coach, okay? Yet you're going to have to come up with tools that help them do that. So what we're seeing progressive HR departments do now is come up with tools that enable their leaders to coach, okay? And they're spreading that out to more and more people. So our point of view is used in conjunction with strengths and more agile goals and feedback that effective coaching can drive performance improvement. And that is the goal of coaching. That's the goal of any coaching, is to drive performance improvement. So equip your managers to do that. Give them tools to do that, because that's how you're going to make it real time. That's how you're going to make it more frequent. That's how you're going to make it more engaging. But we are seeing that trend, and we are seeing progressive organizations. They are modeling it. They are codifying it. They are purposefully building coaching into their culture. And you're going to get a lot of good coaching tools over the next 2 days. But the key to any effective coaching process is improved performance. I think we can all agree on that. So why not put tools in your manager's hands to be able to do that, okay? So our 5th area, rewards and comp, okay? So let's talk about rewards and comp and talk about those two things separately, or just label them total rewards. But conventional wisdom says performance evaluations are useless, yet we have to do it. It's this ritual we go through every year, and we've always done it this way, and managers and employees have to go through it because HR said we have to do it, okay? Nothing like taking a responsibility. Yeah, HR said we have to do it. Yet, if you suffer through this, you'll get a percentage increase in your salary. Okay, that's not retention for people. That's not what this generation is looking for. They are looking for something that is more rich, but they are looking for something that is also more qualitative, rather than just figuring out a score. And then whenever I hear the word calibration, a shiver goes down my spine. Because if you've had to calibrate evaluations, I think you know what that's code for, okay? So the idea that we believe in is to eliminate ratings and rankings, okay? There's different camps on this. There's people who make a strong case for doing it. People say you need to retain ratings. I'm somebody who came from a very ratings-driven organization, and I have totally done a 180 on my view of this. And I sincerely believe that you can manage performance without ratings, okay? Now that is a huge, huge leap of faith for most organizations, but something that we're gonna focus on the next 2 days. And we believe that they're too subjective. They're not an accurate measure of performance, but the simplest thing you can do is separate the comp discussion from the performance discussion. Is there any logical reason why the comp discussion and the performance discussion need to take place at the same time, except for efficiency? Well, they do, because the manager has to do it and get back to his or her real job. Well, this is your real job, chief. I mean, that's the deal, okay? So if you have to do it, if you can't get rid of it, at least separate it and decouple those two things. So decoupling the comp and performance discussion is a thing you can do right away, but managers should be more involved in that comp discussion. They just shouldn't be the messenger, okay? So we're gonna dig in tomorrow on how to break that mold around comp, because that's a real block point for a lot of people, okay? Now, our sixth and final component of the model is recognition, okay? And notice the word social in there. Also notice the word shift, which I have said correctly 3 times. So shifting that emphasis from formal recognition to more informal recognition, more focused on day to day, okay? So what's the conventional wisdom? The conventional wisdom is we recognize the few for epic achievements. It's done based on the calendar. It's done based on large company meetings, but if these people can be heroes, so can you. I mean, look at this guy, Mark. He can be a hero, so can you. If he can do it, anybody can, okay? So the idea is by focusing on that epic achievement, though, we're missing out on so many opportunities to capture that, okay? With the growth of social, with the growth of what's out there, recognition, our point of view is should be focused on more smaller, more meaningful contributions. Build those up over time. Build those up over the year, the quarter, the month, whatever that cycle is. I hope it's not a year, that you at least get it down to a quarter, even monthly, or maybe even real time. But make it smaller but meaningful. Leverage the technology that's out there. There's apps, there's all kinds of stuff. There's jabbers and links and all kinds of stuff out there that allows you to do that. Some of you have that technology already. But what are you going to do to drive that with people? So crowdsource, democratize, enable peer-to-peer recognition. It can be a critical part of a more agile approach, okay? So with that, we've discussed agility, we've looked at the new normal, we've looked at the business case for differentiation, we've looked at the HCI model, and we've looked at our different points of view on performance management. And let's spend the rest of our time together talking about what you're gonna do when you get back, okay? Yet, first, another reminder of why reinventing performance management is important. And I randomly picked this slide. I'm glad that High Ground is a sponsor. I'm glad you're here, so hopefully I get to meet Andy or somebody that knows her. But I just love this quote because it is so indicative of what I've heard over the years. It's like, I don't remember much of what happened. I wanted to get it over with and get it done, okay? And that is not a place that I want to invest in my business, just like Accenture, just like the other companies. There's better things managers can be doing with their time, and there's more effective responses to take care of the people. But the idea here is, isn't it all about people? Isn't that what performance management is about, is people? We need a more people-centric approach to it, okay? So go ahead and access that planner again. And if you've had a chance to do the 24, that's great. And if you've had a chance to add that up, if not, you can do that over the next day or two. But I encourage you to focus on what you have in here. And this is a great guide to take away. Now, if you flip forward, way forward, to page 31, or actually at the top of page 30, it talks about making the case for change at your organization, okay? Now, what we recommend is as you take the score off page 4, you flip back over the questions, you take what you learn over the next 2 days, and the people that you talk to, the information that you gather, pick the top thing you're gonna do. Pick the one thing you're gonna focus on. Remember, I said I want you to focus that energy like a laser. You got energy around it. Focus that energy on the one thing you're gonna do. What's your top item you're gonna do when you get back, okay? Then you can use this template, this this consulting and execution model, the CES model right there, that talks about define it, plan it, gather data, recommend solutions, implement, follow up, and evaluate. Or use your change management model, use a Cotter, use an ADCAR, use a GE CAP, whatever that's out there, whatever your change management model is. But that's the key to it, okay? We can talk all day about it, but you need a change management plan to actually make this change in your organization, okay? So that's the takeaway there, but remember, you're gonna have to build that case for change, okay? It shouldn't be selling. It should be pretty obvious, okay? But speak the language of business. Make the change. You're the person that can drive it, and it's a great time to be in HR. But the idea is, think of performance management as something that we do with the organization, not something that we do to the organization. So if you go in and say, I need senior leadership support, I'm the best person to know if it's culturally right, okay? And I need to link to business objectives. Start with your mindset that what I need to do is say performance management, yes, it's a challenge, yes, it's hard work, but it's something that I am gonna do with the organization and not to the organization, okay? So, in closing, one more quote. And I get a little shout out to Peter Drucker because I don't want to get my nerd card pulled. But if culture eats strategy for breakfast, then traditional performance management systems are going to eat innovation for lunch. And that's what you want. That's what we hear from people. We need to be more innovative, okay? So again, think about what you're going to do differently. Take what you learned the next 2 days. Take the individual action planner and know what you're going to do when you get back. So my final points, and in closing, what I'd like to say first is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Build on your strengths and leverage the culture. Don't believe that article that says, I got rid of performance reviews and you can too, okay? Maybe you can get rid of part of the process, but if you're gonna go for a big bang, you better fasten your seatbelt because it's gonna be a bumpy ride, okay? I would suggest a pilot. I would suggest finding out what works, leverage the culture, build on strengths. Number 2 is there is no, I repeat, no shortage of white papers, information, infographics, webcasts, podcasts, conferences, HBR things. Everybody is talking about this right now. There is no shortage of opinion out there, but find the success stories. Find what's working out there and what could work for you. But what we see as a common denominator is we see that progressive organizations are becoming more agile. They're reducing cycle time. They're keeping up with the rate of external change. They're redesigning and reinventing. So customize it. Get that senior leadership support. Link your case to business objectives. Make that case for change. And don't be a part of the Left Behind series, okay? Find the quick wins. Find the low-hanging fruit. And then last, I would just say, remember what you're doing is an evolution, not a revolution. And I would say the evolution starts now. So thank you. Appreciate you being here. And have a great rest of the conference, and I'll look forward to seeing you out there.